Greetings and welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. We've had a really active period in the UFO UAP field for the last couple of years. Lots of talk about disclosure, the U.S. congressional hearings, and so forth. And all of that's important. But for me personally, I have been interested in, for many, many years, in speaking with individuals from around the world who are engaged in UFO research. I just think it's a really good thing for those of us, especially in the West, especially in the United States, to get out of our little bubbles and to recognize that the UFO UAP phenomenon is global. As far as we can look back in history, it has always been global. And it's not a smart idea to be focusing on this phenomenon in such a limited way. I think we really want to get a full worldwide perspective. And for that reason, I'm just very, very pleased to have as my guest Jinwoo Yu, who is of the Korean UAP Society. Jinwoo and I spoke a couple of months ago for his YouTube channel. It was a wonderful conversation. In fact, I'll have a link for that in the description. I would encourage everyone to go take a look at that. Jinwoo Yu, thank you so very much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me, Richard. It's an honor, really.
It is my pleasure, and I'm just very glad to have you here. Mm-hmm. So you have been researching UAP or UFOs in South Korea or Korea for many years. And I think it's fair to say that in the West, there's not a lot of knowledge about what has been going on in your part of the world. Both in terms of the UFO phenomenon, as well as in terms of the research and, what's been going on in that regard as well. So I'm just very happy to greet you here and to ask you, what are some of the things that we're missing here? Or what's going on the other side of the world in Korea relating to UAP?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that in terms of the amount of information that is available here in Korea, is quite limited compared to the information that is available in the States or the Western countries. I think one of the main reasons is that because of the cultural or the heritage background, a lot of the Asian people, at least when it comes to Korean people tend to still neglect issues around UFOs. Even with the recent congressional hearings, I've rarely seen any Korean mass media covering that topic. So the information is quite limited here in Korea, but still there are some fascinating incidents that have happened, dating all the way back to like 1600s even. So that's something I would like to talk about today, and for your audience as well as Western audience, I would like to introduce some of the Korean UFO incidents that happened over the years.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry about that. Apologies.
He's allowed on. He may distract you, but he's welcome. Well, just so before we get into that, I'll just point out that even in the United States, there are many, many people who are, in my view anyway, not really paying much attention to what has happened in the U.S. Congress over the last couple of weeks. There has been some news coverage, of course, and a lot in the alternative media, but there are a lot of people here as well, where I am, who just do not have a lot of awareness of the phenomenon, even now. So, but I'll take your point that is probably even more severe where you are. But yes, let's dive right into it. So I've got some slides that you have provided here. And let me know whenever you want to display them, and we can jump right in.
All right, if you just could go and proceed with those slides. Just give me a moment.
I have this one right here. This is you have the oldest record of a UFO sighting in Korea in 1609.
Right.
Yeah. What do we have here?
So the oldest record of a UFO sighting in Korea dates back to year 1609 in a set of historical records in Korea's dynasty era. These records are currently listed as UNESCO World Heritage and also designated as Korean National Treasure. So if you look on the left side of this slide, you could see the recording of UFO in the Journal of Prince Gwanghae. So in 1609, in the eastern province of Korea, as you could see on the map here,
I'm
that's a
going to do a
map
full
of
screen
South
here.
Korea,
Yes.
and that's a flying path of the purportedly UFO through the eastern province. It is recorded that an object appeared in the sky making some sounds. It was described as pointy on top and more wide and circular on the bottom, just like a cone.
Hmm.
Um, it is also just described to be flying fast as an arrow, leaving behind smoke. It is recorded that it made a loud thunder-like sound, shaking the ground just before its disappearance. On the same day, later in the afternoon, a similar sighting is recorded of an object that was circular and showed a white, red, and blue colors. It is recorded that as the object ascended into the sky, its color turned all red and then transformed into a white cloud. Again, thunder like sounds were heard, and sounds like rocks tumbling, drums rolling were heard from this floating object. So we were talking about early 1600s. Sightings of these peculiar objects in the sky now recorded in the UNESCO listed historical archive.
So we're talking about you said it was an arrow shaped object, or did I mishear that?
So it was two objects,
Two
one of
objects.
them being a cone shaped object,
Hmm.
another one being an arrow shaped object.
Interesting.
Hmm.
I wonder, and do we know what part of South of Korea this was in? Is that
So if you could
like
see
in
the
kind of in the
map here
center
in
of
the
Korea
center,
there, it looks like.
so it's the eastern province of South Korea.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
Have there
So it
been
was
any
appeared in two cities and two different cities that were 30 miles apart from each other.
um, I know with a lot of the older UFO events that have been recorded, sometimes you get a specific date. Sometimes they don't put a specific date in there. You just have the year.
Hmm.
In this case, you've got this specific location, which is very good. Is there a specific date recorded with this one, Jinwoo?
Within the journal, it only mentions a year, not
Yeah,
specific month or
yeah.
date, just a year.
That's not unusual, frankly, and
Mhm.
it's just the way that record keeping often is kept. You find with the older UFO sightings, there's really only a few regions in the world that even had the ability to record them. East
Mhm.
Asia being one, and Europe really
Mhm.
being the other. They're essentially that's sometimes we can find recordings of places in the Near East, Arabia, and places like that. But typically, when I look at some of the older sightings, you're looking at basically China, Korea, Japan in
Mhm.
the East, and then in the West, the various European nations as well. And they don't all have specific dates, unfortunately. It's just the way that it is. But this is quite interesting indeed. So, have there been any attempts by, say, skeptics, for example, to explain what this might have been? Are they saying things like meteors? Doesn't really make sense to
So,
me. But
of
what do they
course,
say?
meteor was one of the main arguments. But if this was a meteor sighting, it would have been recorded in a greater number of towns rather than just being recording in two towns.
Right, very limited,
That
right?
was
Very,
one of the argument that are made by skeptics. It could have been a meteor sighting.
and also, I just again I want to make sure I'm understanding properly. So, is
Mhm.
the did the object take a curved path? Is that what that indication is in the center graphic there? Did it?
So if you see the red, there's a light red and the bold red regions
Yes.
of the eastern province, and those bold regions are the towns that have reported to have seen this object in this
Hmm.
journal. So
Oh yeah.
that is just the estimated flying path of this object.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that could
Mhm.
make sense. That makes
Mhm.
sense. Well, that is interesting indeed. Um,
I what
yeah.
what was quite interesting to me was this description of this UFO having thunder-like, rock tumbling, drum rolling sounds.
Hmm.
I mean, aspect of sound is not one of the defining features of UFO in the modern era, as far as I'm aware. Do you know of any incidents that have this kind of sound features?
Sometimes, yeah,
Hmm.
I do know there are occasions where UFOs in the modern era have been known to make uh, some sounds. Trying to
Hmm.
think offhand where. I think it's true. Typically, they are quiet or even silent.
Hmm.
But well, I wish I'd been able to look into this beforehand. But I don't think it's a unique feature of
Right.
these aerial phenomena. In any case, it just begs the question: what really could explain this best?
Hmm.
I guess if someone's going on the assumption that there are no UFOs, they would have to go with something like natural, like a meteorite or
Right.
meteor. But if you consider that there are genuine UFOs, I think what you've got here is a real potential one. So, uh, yeah, thanks for showing this. This is quite
So
interesting.
I've tried to search online whether there were similar incidents dating back to this era,
Mhm,
and I found this woodcut engraving dating back to year 1561
mhm.
of what's called the celestial phenomenon over Nuremberg, Germany. As you could see here on the picture here on the right of the slide, it seems to depict some kind of an aerial battle between different shaped objects such as orbs, crosses, and cylinders. And I found it interesting to see some similarities in the types of UFOs observed in this period, since the German and Korean record is only 40 years apart.
Yes, indeed. I'm a big fan of the book Wonders in the Sky by Jacques Vallée and Chris Aubeck. I think it's one of it's one of my favorite UFO books. I'll be quite honest about it. I read it frequently, and I'm a
Mhm,
big fan of what they did there. And in that one, I you find that there actually are a lot of really good early sightings that they have. I find that some I'm very persuaded by, and others not as much. The
mhm,
Nuremberg one that you've got here, I will just admit I'm on the fence about that one. There are
mhm.
reasons that I wonder about its legitimacy.
I see.
But I mean, I'm not trying to debunk it here, but I just
Mhm.
Nuremberg was in the midst of a very significant amount of religious and cultural strife going on at the time, and
I
I've
see.
always wondered. They were on the brink of massive, century-long civil war
Mhm,
between the Protestant and Catholic factions in the country, and I've always wondered if this had something to do with that. And
mhm,
with Europeans, I know particularly they were very interested in looking at signs and portents in the sky, and
mhm.
some of them are good to me, and in my opinion, some I just wonder. But in the case of your sighting here in South Korea, I keep saying South Korea. Forgive me. This is in Korea, 1609.
Mhm,
Uh, that's an interesting one, I must say, and I'm very
mhm,
glad that you've started us off with an interesting ancient report.
mhm.
Do you want to move on to any of the other sightings more recently that you want to discuss?
Sure. Like if we go to the next slide, I'll be going through the incidents by timeline from the oldest to the
Yeah,
most recent event.
great, great.
So now I would like to talk about some of the Korean UFOs in the Korean War period from 1950 to 1953. Um, there were many mid-air UFO encounters reported throughout the Korean War. To show in numbers, 42 incidents were experienced by 63 military personnel, ranging from pilots, marines, and etc. And they were eventually reported and filed to Project Blue Book.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure you are a historian yourself, but let me just briefly go over the Korean War
Oh, I'm very glad,
before.
and
Mm,
this was a very, I mean, it was a major event in modern history, of course, but
right.
also in the history of the UFO phenomenon. A
Mhm.
lot happened during that war, and I'm
Exactly.
glad we're getting to discuss it. So yeah, please continue.
I think it's important to know the Korean War for understanding the context of all this. So the Korean War was fought between North and South Korea. North Korea was supported by China and Soviet Union, while South Korea was supported by 21 countries from United Nations, but principally the United States. One key thing to note is that this is a war where jet fighters on each side, supported by jet fighters on each side, confronted each other in air-to-air combat for the first time in history, as far as I'm aware. And the Korean War resulted in 3 million war fatalities and a larger proportional civilian death toll than any war previously, including World War II or the Vietnam War.
I don't think
Um,
I was aware of that particular fact. That's astonishing.
mhm, it literally incurred the destruction of virtually all of the Korean major cities. And if there are any correlations between frequency of UFO appearance and regions of military conflict, it may not be such a stretch to suggest that Korean Peninsula at the time was a hotspot for UFOs. Mhm,
This makes perfect sense to me.
mhm, mhm.
I mean,
And
if you just assume that if there are other beings behind this intelligence, they're going to be very interested in main areas of human violence
right,
that are going on at the time, and Korea certainly took first prize at that time.
right. And in the interest of time, I would like to just share one interesting UFO incident. There were many UFO incidents during the Korean War, but I would like to share just one
Mhm.
that happened in year 1951. That happened to American soldiers, actually.
Mhm.
So this happened in the battle trenches of Eastern Front Line of the Korean War.
Mhm.
American Army men observed a glowing saucer-shaped UFO, and this UFO stays afloat directly in their artillery's line of fire, but it remained untouched. Upon the order from their commander, the Army men fires their M1 carbine rifle at the UFO. Naturally, the UFO fires back with supposedly laser beam like weapon.
Mhm.
And these men who were struck by these beams immediately felt burns all over their bodies. They reported to have suffered extreme headaches, memory losses, an ongoing period of disorientations. And after going through some medical examinations, it was reported that they showed extreme high count of white blood cells. And I thought this was interesting case in that uh, it showed aggressive behavior as well as potentially dangerous nature of UFO. Although it was the humans who first acted with aggression in this case.
Mhm. This is a case that I have heard of as well.
Mhm.
I'm trying to recall exactly what the source was, but I remembered when I read it, it definitely did seem like a plausible account. I'm just trying to recall exactly what that source was. I don't know if you recall or not, but
It,
this is
it,
one that's known. Yeah.
it is mentioned from the slide on the left. It's mentioned in
Oh,
this
yeah.
book by Richard Hines. The book name is
There we go.
Advanced
Yes.
Aerial Devices Reported During the Korean War.
Okay. Excellent.
Mhm.
I don't have that book. I want to get that book. um, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, I know there's quite a few cases actually from the Korean War. If there's any others you want to discuss, or
There are a couple other, but uh, instead of talking about cases, I was looking into other events that happened in the similar timeline,
Mhm.
and interestingly enough, there was this 1952 Washington D.C. UFO incident. I'm sure you're very well aware of that event where multiple UFO sightings in above Capitol Hill
Mhm.
or White House in 1952. I
That's
came
right.
to wonder if this had anything to do with U.S. involvement in Korean War. It's just pure speculations here, but
Oh,
I thought that was an interesting connection.
I don't know. That is interesting, and
Mhm,
I'm not sure how I would be able to research that possibility, but uh, it's worth thinking about. I
mhm,
mean, in America, like we're just so insulated, and it's so obvious that we Americans do not generally consider the global effect of what America's imprint around the world is. So I don't
mhm,
really make that connection, or B, even pay attention to 90% of what goes on beyond our
mhm,
borders. So
mhm,
it is an interesting question to ask. In
mhm.
1952, the war was going hot and heavy in Korea,
Exactly,
and the United
exactly,
States was doing really all the strategic management of the fighting on one side of it. So
exactly, exactly.
why not, indeed?
Mhm,
So Thank you for the link to Richard Haynes, or the reference to Richard Haynes's book too. I'm
Mhm.
Richard. He's still around. He's getting quite
Oh,
up
he
there.
is? Okay. Okay.
I believe he is. I hope he is. And he's a great researcher. In fact, I think Richard Haynes might be the individual who coined the phrase UAP.
Mhm.
For real, I think he might have
Oh,
done that. I think he did.
interesting.
Maybe people can correct me in the comments, but I think it was around 1980 or so that he's the one who coined that phrase, and it took a while for
Mhm.
that to get some traction, of course. But here we are. So
I would like to also note that because this war was really, American military was on the forefront of this war. A lot of the information on UFOs in this period came from, American English archive rather than Korean archive. So that was one of the difficulties for me researching information in this period.
yeah, that kind of
There
makes
was
sense.
more information in the American archive rather than Korean archive.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting. Shall I move
Okay,
to the next slide here, or
okay, moving on. Next slide.
yeah?
So I also put here a mass sighting event in Korea.
Mhm.
So this UFO incident is significant that it was the first recorded UFO mass UFO sighting in Korea, and still stands as the largest mass sighting event with approximately 50 witnesses.
Oh yeah. Now,
So
where
this
in Korea is this, if I may
So
ask?
this is southern western part of the South Korea
Okay.
in the
Okay.
city village of Boryang in 1973.
Okay.
So at around noon,
Mhm.
uh, this teacher named Mr. Lee and his 22 fourth grade students observe a bright silver emanating UFO ascending above the school's outside public bathroom. The UFO was rotating rapidly and flew across nearby Pine Grove before disappearing from sight. And shortly after, another UFO appeared above the restroom and followed the same path as the previous one. And these UFOs were just 20 meters above ground when they were first spotted and were approximately 2 meters, 1 to 2 meters in width. The students had said that smokes had lingered around the UFO's floating area, and no sounds could be heard as these UFOs flew across the pine groves at extreme speeds.
This
And
map that you're showing us,
Mhm,
how large is that region? Because they're looking. It looks like they made a very tight turn here.
mhm.
Is this? This looks like it's a very small area.
It's a very small area, small
Yeah.
town. As you can see here, you see a schoolyard.
Yes.
I would say less than two, three, less than 3 kilometers at
Yeah.
best.
Looks small.
Hmm, hmm.
And these were two smallish objects. Were they disc shaped or were they a different shape?
Right, this shape. And
They
let
were
me
disc shaped.
explain that further in the next slide.
Oh, sure. Let's move on here.
All right.
And there we go.
So on this, so uh, teacher Mr. Lee had reported this event to the school's principal at the time, and had each of his 22 students draw the observed UFO on the chalkboard. And surprisingly enough, all 22 students depicted a similar object. So disc shaped, emanating a silver light. And as you can see here on the slide on the right, picture on the right of this slide, it's a drawing by one of the students.
This bluish drawing that you're showing me here.
Exactly. So it's a disc-shaped UFO with a silver light emanating from the center.
Can you explain these four panels on the left? Because it's obviously the exact same drawing on the top, but there's different things happening here.
Right. So
What's that all about?
of the 22 students, two students were fortunate to have witnessed this UFO from the very first appearance,
Hmm.
and they have provided detailed observations. They initially saw a huge single cloud appear in the sky, which you can see on the very left of this
Yes.
picture, and that it suddenly dispersed into six smaller clouds, and this six clouds then combined itself into one, and then finally divided into two. And as these two clouds were dissipating, the two students have said that two rugby-shaped UFO, initially emanating red color, had appeared. And these two students had also said that UFOs uh, changed their emanating color from red to silver as it started to spin itself before it flew on its path. So
So
that
the just to understand, so the original it was a cloud-like formation that they originally saw. That's right.
Mhm.
Did it detach other things out of it, or did it transform into these other things?
So initially, they saw one big cloud on the sky appear, and then it
Mhm.
blurted out six small clouds.
It
And
ejected essentially six smaller things.
correct. And this
I
six
see.
small clouds then combined itself into one,
One thing, which then
and
split.
then again divided itself into two.
Okay, and which then changed colors.
And these two clouds started dissipating itself, and that's when the two rugby-shaped UFO appeared.
And they are the two objects that did this trans they're the ones that moved around the town in this
Right,
manner. That's correct.
right.
Okay. That's
And
very
they showed
interesting.
they had a red light emanating from the center, but the students
Mhm.
have reported that this color from red had changed to silver as this disc started spinning itself before it flew on its path.
Now, did this get a lot of attention at the time? Did it make the newspapers, that type of thing?
It did, but I haven't seen many news article on this. It did got some coverage, but
Hmm.
not a huge issue at the time.
Well, it's interesting. You said
Mhm.
20 meters above the ground. Is that right?
20 meters above ground.
Yeah, it's
That
very,
that's not
very
low.
low.
Very very
It's
low.
extremely low. You may know there was a interesting school witness case not long before this
Right.
in the town of Westall, Australia, near Melbourne,
Oh,
and and
I
that
thought
was
I was thinking of the Zimbabwe case, but not the.
well,
I
that's
haven't heard of
another
it.
one that's in the
Mhm.
90s. But in 1966, in the town of Westall, which is just a suburb
Oh, right.
of Melbourne, in the
Hmm.
southern part of Australia, there was a landing or an apparent landing of a craft, also seen by a large number of school kids.
Mm.
But they too, like the case in Korea here, you had a lot of young people witnessing a low flying craft.
Hmm.
In their case, apparently it landed briefly, very briefly. In this case here, apparently these objects did not land, but
Oh, it did actually.
oh, it did.
Yes.
So what
So
what happened with that?
so as the teacher, Mr. Lee, was compiling, students' testimonies in his office, he then hears students crying out that the UFOs has landed at the valley of a nearby mountain. So
Mhm.
the teacher runs down to the mountain and he visits the site. He finds the signs of landing. He has said that the soil nearby appeared to be have seen it appeared to be paved as if there was a craft that had landed.
You say paved,
It was paved
like just
soil,
baked very hard, or actually paved?
paved in as if
Oh,
some heavy
caved in.
object has landed on the soil.
So sorry, caved in. Yeah, it was like a depression in the ground,
Right,
essentially.
right. As
So it left a
if you
landing
could
trace.
go back up the slide,
Yeah.
and there is the two location of the landing sites as
So
these
oh, in this oh yeah,
in the
yeah.
yellow.
First landing site is in the kind of the top right area of the map,
Right,
and then the second landing site below that.
right. And
Okay.
the
Wow.
teacher has also inquired the local villagers as if they saw these objects, and uh, approximately 30 or so villagers have also seen these objects landing at this site and flying through the pine grove nearby.
I'm
So,
annoyed at myself for not knowing about this case.
mhm,
This is very significant. Do we have a
mhm.
date on this one, Jinwoo?
um,
Sorry
I
to put you
think
on the spot.
this does have a date. I can't recall at the moment, but this does have
Okay.
a date.
We'll look into it. Yeah.
Okay, it
Yeah.
happened in 1973 at 12:30
That's,
p.m. So it must have a date.
yeah. I've no doubt.
Mhm.
Fascinating.
And
Anything else
the
about this?
as in terms of that two students that saw these objects,
Mhm.
They were fourth grade at then, so they're in the age of 60s right now, 50 or 60s, I think, and I have their phone numbers as well. So I've been meaning to get
They're
in
about
contact
my
with
age.
them.
1973. I think I was in the sixth grade, fifth or
Hmm.
sixth grade. So yeah.
I've been meaning to get in contact with them and have a short interview or what to
I
see
think
to
that
see.
would be a great idea
Hmm. Hmm.
if you can find any of these individuals, because this is, uh, I keep thinking of the Westall case, which there's certain things in common here.
Hmm.
And that particular case is a very rightly well-known, and I would say a very important case. Um, I visited Westall on one occasion a few years ago, and
Oh, it is.
it's a very there's a lot of interest in that case to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we have here is seems to be potentially, or actually, very much on the level. Same type of experience. Did anyone get close to the landed craft? It doesn't sound like they did, but I'm just wondering.
They've been only able to see the craft land and then
Mhm.
leave. So when
Wow.
they got to the site, it was always already gone.
Wonder what was going on there. That's very interesting indeed. Had
I
no
was
idea.
I was actually curious and I had a question for you. What how in terms of how this UFOs appeared, it came out of these clouds. Is this kind of phenomenon also observed other parts of the world as
Yes,
well?
yes, yes, yes. That I can
Okay.
definitely say yes. And if you're going to
Mhm,
ask me about a specific case, I'm going to
mhm,
have to draw a blank. But I know, I mean, absolutely,
mhm,
objects have been seen on a number of occasions
mhm.
to have come out of clouds or cloud-like phenomena in the sky. I say
Right,
cloud-like because sometimes people will say, "Well, it was an unusual looking type of a cloud," and so forth, and
right,
it makes you wonder what was it really.
right.
But clouds, I think it's not unusual, have been used to conceal
Mm,
these objects at various times, and
mhm,
that's what sounds like it happened. What
mhm,
happened here?
mhm.
The real question that you always wonder is, what were these things doing? what what were they're doing? A quick little tight maneuver flyover of this very small town.
Right.
Um,
This is
and
a
I
very
always
rural
wonder.
area of Korea, by the way.
Mhm.
It's not a one of the big cities. It's a small city, small regional rural city of South Korea. So
I find
just
one of
wondering
the
why
great
they would be interested in this region.
one of the big mysteries for me is always just trying to understand the motivations
Right.
for the sightings themselves. Like, there's presumably you'd think that there's some kind of motivation going on the other side of it. Like, why would they be doing this? Why do a quick little flyover of any particular area, not just this one?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just there's lots of questions and all too few answers, unfortunately. But
In
this
terms
is
of
a
Westall
really
School, is that elementary school?
the Westall. Yes, that was. In fact, I think the students were of a similar age
That
as
is
the
quite
ones here.
interesting because the I would say similarity I now that think between Zimbabwe Ariel school case, this
Mhm.
case and Westall case, it all relates to elementary school kids rather than high school or college.
That's
That's
true.
quite
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Mhm.
Westall. I think they might have been 9, 10, 11 years of age, maybe
Right.
12 at the most. But they were not grown adults. They were not even teenagers for the most part. So
Hmm.
yeah, that is interesting. And then the Zimbabwe case, of course, that's 1994.
Right.
Uh, that one was really quite spectacular because you had some witnesses who actually not only did they get close to the landed craft, but they actually saw beings.
Right. Right.
And almost a couple of them got close enough, base almost to shake their hand,
Hmm.
essentially. But I love hearing about this case. This is quite fascinating, and I will admit it was unknown to me, and I suspect unknown to a lot of people.
Hmm. Hmm.
Any other follow up about this, or anything else that comes to mind in the
I
research
will
on it?
certainly follow up with you on this case after meeting with that student that has now
For sure,
grown 6 year old. Yeah.
that would deserve a documentary all of its own, I would think. But
Mhm.
definitely would love to hear about it. It's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Do you want to move on to any other cases or slides that you have here?
Yes. Next slide.
Here we are.
Mhm. So this UFO incident that happened directly above the Blue Embassy of Korea in 1976. This is quite interesting in that it is somewhat similar to the Battle of Los Angeles case in 1942.
Hmm.
and that there were both attempted UFO shoot down events. So, Blue Embassy, this is a equivalent of U.S. White House. This Blue Embassy is
I
where
see.
Korean president resides.
Yes. Okay.
So when you look at the picture on the left
That's
here,
an incredible photograph, by the way.
oh, it isn't a photograph. It's just an illustration
Okay.
of
Okay.
how
Thank
these
you.
UFOs appeared.
Even so, it's very interesting.
Mhm.
There's
So
a. Oh, go on. I don't want to
go
interrupt.
ahead, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the photograph on the left reminds me of there's a famous series of photographs in the U.S. from the 1950s called the Lubbock Lights,
Hmm.
and I'm thinking it's 1957. And the photographs for that show a kind of a wing type series of lights,
Hmm.
very much similar
Hmm.
to what you have here. If I had a copy handy, I could put it up there and show. But I think a lot of people might even remember it from memory. Anyway, go on, please.
Mm. So when more than 10 mysterious flying objects suddenly appeared directly above the Blue Embassy, in this happened in the early evening of October in 1976.
Mhm.
This brought immediate attention to not only the Korean citizens but of course the Korean army as well. The South Korean government at the time had a very tense and fragile relationship against North Korea, with small military conflicts occurring time to time. And obviously these objects that had lingered above the most sensitive airspace of South Korea inevitably led to military actions. These objects were reported to have stayed above the city for 1 to 2 hours, so very long time. After
Essentially hovering or maneuvering or
hovering for 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours. Um,
hmm.
After two warning broadcasts, Korean military had no choice but to fire their 20 millimeters Vulcan cannon against these flying objects. They fired upon barrage of this cannon for 20 minutes, and then this is when UFOs finally retreated itself into the northwestern direction, and it disappeared. But then this incident, escalated it to a worst situation ever when the ricochets of all these fire from the Vulcan cannon, it, right above the city,
Yes.
resulted in one civilian death
What?
and 31 injuries because they were firing against right above the city, so
So they were hitting these objects?
they couldn't. They were firing at these objects, but these objects were just lingering, slowly retreating itself.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Then they disappeared. But all these ricochets that was dropping from the air,
Yes.
led to one civilian death.
Fascinating. Yeah, that is very, very similar to what we had in 1942 in Los Angeles, as you correctly mentioned.
Mhm.
There
And
were
then,
several deaths in that case.
and the next day, the Korea's National Defense Committee was convened, and then came up with the very outlandish public statement that it was actually Northwest Airline Boeing 707 freight airliner that had accidentally intruded the Korean airspace, and that
Come
the
on,
Korean army had no choice but to proceed with the warning shots.
you
And
got to be kidding! That's the most
this
lame
is
excuse I can imagine.
exactly because the very concept of a foreign freight airliner intruding Korea's restricted flight area for not 10 minutes but 2 hours.
Over
It,
Seoul, over the capital,
oh, right,
over the government's headquarters, essentially,
right. It does not make
the
any
seat of
sense.
government.
And and the fact that they were shooting warning shots for 20 minutes on a single freight airliner, eventually leading to a civilian death. That just shows an incompetency of Korean military, to say the least. So
Well,
it was
incompetent
a
related to UFO technology, which is pretty much everybody.
right.
So I was wondering if they were going to blame the North Koreans on this, but that would be a stretch, even then, I would think, right?
If they did, it was a very I would say sensitive times with the North Korean government back then. So I think that's why they diverted their attention towards Northwest Airline.
Well, yeah.
Very very interesting case that they came out with this outlandish statement, but then the public never followed up with it. So
This is just fascinating.
mhm,
I'm getting an education here from you, and I'm very grateful for that.
mhm,
It's a remarkable case.
mhm,
I
mhm.
feel as though you're being very gracious in giving us some of the highlights, but I have no doubt that there is a deep and rich history, even in addition to these cases here. So I think we're just dipping our toe in the water, as it were.
Mhm,
Quite
mhm.
fascinating. So, is there anything else to say about this? Sounds to me. I'm just going to throw out my suggestion that their explanation that this was I guess, a foreign commercial airliner,
Freight
freight
airliner,
airliner. Yeah, transport.
specifically America's North West airline.
So they were actually saying as their explanation that they were firing on an American airliner
As a
that had
warning shot.
strayed into their airspace.
Right.
I
And
mean, can we assume that that airliner has never been identified? I
exactly.
mean, I mean, there's
That's what they're saying, but it never been identified. A lot of the citizens that have seen the objects said it was not one object; it was a multiple objects, as you could see here on the
yes,
left
yes,
of
yes.
this slide. It was a multiple objects that was lined up as if it was like
Right.
a Starlink. No,
Yeah, but in 1976.
right. And I try to get more information on this. No matter how much I look, it seems like Korean government try to conceal this information as much as possible. Almost not. There aren't many information available apart from citizens reporting.
That's also not unique, by the way. I think
Mhm,
there's a lot of nations that do suppress UFO data, not just
mhm.
Korea.
Right,
But what an interesting case.
right.
Uh, uh,
I have I
we
have a
cannot
lot.
be 40 minutes into this. I can't believe that we've been here for 40 minutes. We're going to have to take as much time as we need for this because you just have too much excellent information. Do you want to move on to the next case?
Right. Next case, the last case I have prepared
Yeah.
today.
Okay.
Um, I believe this case is the most credible and
Mhm.
convincing UFO case of Korea involving our Korean fighter jet pilots.
Okay.
So as you could see here on the left side of the slide, you see a retired General Major M.
Yes.
Is a retired General Major of Korean Air Force, and he reported a fascinating UFO sighting in March of 1980,
Mhm.
which was an event where UFO was observed by four fighter jet pilots for the period of 20 to 30 minutes. So this is a quite long duration as well. This event occurred during the Team Spirit exercise. This is a joint military training exercise between the U.S. forces of Korea and the South Korean military.
Mhm.
General Im's squadron of two F-4 Phantom 1 fighter jets, so comprising of total of four pilots, were partaking in this exercise in the evening of March 1980.
Mhm.
Soon after takeoff, the squadron spots a UFO emanating blue and red lights. It was hovering about 15,000 feet in the air near the city. So
I'm
General
sorry. Can
M.
you tell me where we are in Korea at this time?
So this is city of Daegu. So this is a southern region of South Korea.
Okay. Okay. Near the
So upon
center.
reporting this UFO sighting to the ground command and control center, General Im is then ordered to chase this object. This UFO was not detected on their jet's radar, and supposedly the stealth technologies was only introduced like 10 years after this event. So because this was 1980,
Mhm.
um,
Yes.
the right. So this UFO initially that was spotted near the city started flying over to the East Sea and eventually ascended its altitude to 33,000 feet. It was initially at 15,000 feet, but it was ascending itself to a altitude of 33,000
Can
feet.
we assume that it simply just went vertically up, or did it go on
Right.
a path?
So General Im has reported that he saw a magnificent 90 degree vertical movement, and he never saw anything like that.
Mhm.
And although he said this UFO did not show extreme speed, it wasn't going that fast. But this, object's 90 degrees perpendicular movement was unforgettable experience, according to General M. The size of this UFO was a mid-size passenger airliner. As you could see here on the left side of this slide, the width was approximately 36 meters in width. So it was size
On
of
the
a
bottom left
three
there,
jets
yeah.
put together.
Hmm.
Um, it was disc shaped with blue lights emanating up and down of the disc. But the interesting feature of this disc was at the center. The center of this disc had emitted a intense golden light, as if steel was melting through the smelting furnace. It was emanating a very strong golden light at the center. Um, not Approximately 20 other fighter pilots that was doing the training in the vicinity airspace had reported seeing this UFO, even from a distance 90 kilometers away. But then none of them could have picked up this object on their radar. Um, General Wim came back to the base after this exercise and did submit this report even to the U.S. Air Force. And he said he was replied back with a short memo a few weeks after
Hmm.
from the U.S. Air Force, stating that U.S. Air Force also has received a similar reports, and that the U.S. Air Force was unable to identify this aircraft. And lastly, I thought this UFO incident could well have been the Korean version of the USS Nimitz Tic Tac incident, if not for the lacking radar capability of the Phantom jets, as
Well,
opposed to the right.
it connects in my mind. It connects to several other cases that I can think of from that basic period of time.
Mhm.
The Nimitz is in, yeah, sure, why not? It's a military encounter, but I think it's significant that this was in the southern part of the peninsula, so very far removed from the border with North Korea. That's one thing.
Right.
So it's really you can't blame this. I can't see on the North Koreans in any way.
Mm.
It just seems ridiculous. And also, thinking of the map there, there are no other candidates of nations that would be doing this. Not China, certainly not in 1980, particularly,
Mhm.
and not in the other nations. Japan, clearly not. I
Mhm.
cannot think of any other nation that would have the ability, frankly, to do that, other than maybe the United States if they were playing some kind of game with the Korean military, which I cannot imagine they would do that anyway. But it
Right.
reminds me, you mentioned the glowing aspect of this.
Right.
Um, Back in 1975, so just 5 years earlier, in the U.S., there were a series of sightings over American bases, including one in the U.S. state of Maine, where at a Loring Air Force Base. And I do recall some of the witnesses there said this low object over the base glowed. It glowed as if, and when you looked at it, it said it emitted all of these colors,
Right.
orange, yellow. It
Interesting.
almost like a lava lamp, where the
Mhm.
colors were kind of melting into each other. But it was a definite glow. That was
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
75. I'm also thinking of the 1976 case over the city of Tehran in Iran,
Mm.
which was a very significant um, uh, attempt by the Imperial Iranian Air Force to
Right.
intercept an object over that city, which they had two. They also had F-4 jets engaged in dealing with that, both of
Mhm.
which failed in their
Mhm.
attempts to engage the object.
Mhm.
And here we are in 1980, and something similar seems to be going on here.
Yes. In
It
the
fits
similar
right in.
timeline.
How fascinating! What was the any aftermath of this? I mean, you mentioned in the previous case with the military shooting at the object over the Capitol. Any
Right.
aftermath of relating to this case here?
So this case was only disclosed um, just 15 years ago. So these pilots have only came out with their um, experience after they retired. So it took a while before this information had come out in the public. This happened in 1980, but the information was made public sometime around 2006 or seven, I believe.
Was this
And
through some version of freedom of information that you haven't in
no,
South
you don't
Korea?
have anything like that. Uh, I'm not good with the laws here, but I
Mm,
don't think it came out. It didn't come in with the FOIA or anything. It just these pilots just weren't
just started
haven't
talking.
come out after this incident. They only came out with this after they retired. And I do have an interview of General Major M.
Hmm.
Uh, 10 minutes, 15 minutes long interview that we took 15 years ago, and
Oh,
I showed
okay.
you a snippet of that last time, but I'll be
Yes, you
glad
did.
to share that with you.
Well, I'd like,
Yeah.
is this something that's available online that people can see this interview?
I'll upload them on my YouTube channel with the English subtitle.
Yeah. Oh, and I should just mention, I have links in the description here to your website and your YouTube. So the website is uapkorea.com,
Right.
and there will be a link below there.
Hmm.
And your YouTube channel is X Line. That's X hyphen line
Right.
on YouTube, and I'll have a link for that as well. I would definitely encourage people to look at both of those links. And on your YouTube channel, this interview with the general is available.
I will have that uploaded shortly.
I'm not trying to put pressure on you, but that sounds like an interesting interview. I'm sure
And
it's in Korean, so maybe there'll be subtitles for English speakers.
I have the subtitles ready
Yeah,
already,
great,
so
great.
like I'll just need to upload it. But for my YouTube channel is primarily for Korean audience. We do all the
Of course,
contents in Korean, so
of course.
just have that in as a
No,
reminder.
absolutely. Makes
And
sense.
I'm also a Korean national director for MUFON as well, so I frequently contact with MUFON
Mhm.
personnel time to time.
How active are UAP or UFO sightings in Korea these days? Since you're a MUFON, you may have a handle on that.
In terms of sighting reports that come in through the MUFON database, 3 to 4 at most in a year. But
Not
we have
more.
a separate Korean reporting site called
Ooh, right.
Kufos. It's a different website, and
Yes.
it gets approximately 50 to 60 reportings a year, I believe.
Okay. Okay. Maybe
Yeah,
one a week, roughly speaking.
right,
Is this an online database where people can just report their sighting
right. It's an
on?
online reporting,
So it is.
online.
I'm so glad to hear that because I keep despairing, frankly, over what at least seems to me
Mhm.
the lack of these types of online databases for different languages and different cultures. But it could just be that I'm personally not aware of all of the ones that exist. I did not know, for example, that there was one in Korea where people
Mhm.
could just report online. Um, I'm not trying to be pushy here, but if you give me the link to that website, I might put that below in the description too. I realize it's probably in Korean, but hey, there are Korean speakers probably may be watching this for all I know who may not be aware of such a thing, and it would be good to put that information out there if that's
Right.
possible.
I'll share that link with you uh, after this interview.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very interesting. So, of the recent cases that you are looking at, um, I realize you don't have slides for that, and you may not be prepared to talk offhand about any. But I'll just ask: what are the nature of those sightings, or are there any that stand out to you in your memory that are worth
So
repeating?
unfortunately, most significant event recorded was happened in that 1980, which is
Mhm.
still it's almost 40 years now. I was looking back last 20 years or so, trying to find any significant UFO incidents that were recorded. Surprisingly, there are almost none that are
Interesting.
recorded. I don't know why there has been such uh, closed off information here in Korea, but
What
I
about
could
the
find
current
almost no.
sightings that come in? What are they typically like? Is it
Oh,
just
the sightings. So there were triangular looking type of objects
Mhm,
reported to have seen from the western seaboard,
mhm,
Western Sea. The characteristics often that comes to my mind what was TR3B
mhm.
that is often mentioned in
Okay.
American UFO sites. But
So
another
trying.
type of UFOs typically seen here in Korea are or the cylinder type UFOs, as well as rod looking type UFOs.
Or cigar shape, as we sometimes
Cigar
refer to.
shape, right.
Yeah. So those
And
are reported.
if you think about it, North Korea, UFOs definitely have some interest in nuclear uh, related facilities. I'm quite interested in what's going on over there in North Korea. North Korea has a nuclear capabilities for sure. So there must be
And
some incidents over there.
you have to wonder, what kinds of UFO UAP sightings do take place over North Korea. I think
Right.
you're quite right. The nuclear connection is undeniable at this point. It's been so clearly demonstrated over the years. We have to assume that North Korea has probably a significant history of UFO encounters as well that we just don't know about, I would imagine.
Right.
And I see you gave me the link here to the, is this the
Right.
Korean database? That's kufos.net.
Right. This is the database where you report your UFO sighting here in
Excellent.
Korea. It is the largest database that that has the UFO sightings.
Well, what I'm going to want to do is get some kind of AI translator going to your database and be able to read that whole thing myself. It's got to be possible to translate these things at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm quite interested in that, and very grateful. So are you in touch with any other regional UFO groups out in the East, like Japan or China or any other areas?
So I'm in contact with the MUFON director of Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm also in contact with the Chinese ufologists.
Yes.
Named Her name is Xiao Ma. She's from China. She's Chinese, but she also speaks fluent English.
Yes.
I'll be happy to introduce her to you.
I've
She's
actually met with Xiaoma
Oh, you have?
and interviewed her, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
She's
So
very intelligent, very interesting.
right.
I had to pull my YouTube interview with her. I don't know how much I can say. I think she had concerns about whether or not some of the things she said would be permitted.
Right.
And
She was quite sensitive in terms of. I don't think it's easy for her to go back to China. She resides in Australia right now, as far as I'm aware. But
no, she's very, very interesting, very engaged, active person in the subject. So, yeah, I learned a bit about Chinese ufology from her, actually. There's go on, please.
So we have a group called Asian Ufology Researchers, UFO researchers, and it's her, me, myself, and the two Japanese UFO researchers in Japan.
Very interesting.
But we're happy to invite others in the Asian region.
There's a very interesting researcher out of Hong Kong named Chuck Fei. I don't know if you are familiar with him. I chatted with him, and that was before all of the very, very active demonstrations and protests that happened in Hong Kong just a few years ago. But I did get a very interesting background from him as well. And I'm sure his interview that's on my YouTube channel. People can go look for that.
I'll definitely do so.
Yeah. So in terms of what you've gathered, I mean, I guess I can ask the Japanese representatives if I get the chance, but have you learned of any other interesting patterns or any other interesting things going on in
Asia?
In Asia? Yeah. That,
I would say not in terms of incidents himself, but in terms of general stance towards UFO. I think it's more Japanese people are more open to UFOs than Korean. Mm-hmm. I think if you go from the most conservative to more openness, I would say Chinese government are the most conservative, followed by us, and then the Japanese people are more open to UFOs. It seems like, as we've discussed this among ourselves.
Culturally, I think maybe Japan, they are quite open. I had an impression that actually a lot of the people in China are actually open to the subject as well. The impression that I had, I'm wondering if this was from Xiaoma or somewhere else, was that the Chinese government was in fact quite directly engaged in permitting and monitoring the
Hmm.
various Chinese UFO groups that exist in that
Right.
country, and there are quite a
That's what
few.
I heard.
The impression that I had was that the Chinese government was allowing this because perhaps they're using these groups as intelligence gathering units that
Hmm.
they can kind of tap into, and but definitely seem to be monitoring what they say publicly as well. I mean, one thing
Hmm.
that they do not allow is overt criticism, I think, of the Chinese government
Hmm.
relating to things like cover up and that type of thing. I don't think they permit that. But it was surprising to me that I'd heard that the Chinese government was at least that interested in not suppressing UFO research, and in fact,
Hmm.
to some extent, seemed to be encouraging it. So,
When it comes to Korea, U.S. Korean government hasn't said a single thing when it comes to UFOs. So they don't get involved with it. They don't say anything. So that's been quite
there's another
big.
country that is almost identical in its policy, and that is Germany.
Germany.
Yeah,
Hmm.
the UFO researcher or journalist, I guess I could say that's what he would call himself, that I know best from there is Robert Fleischer, and Robert has done a lot of work in the history of German UFO sightings of the 20th and 21st century, and
Hmm.
also of the German government. And they too, it's almost like it's the same story as with the South Korean government. They
Hmm.
do not say a thing. It's total denial
Hmm.
all the way. So
And
it's
I'm
interesting.
sure that Korean government knows something because we have a very close relationship with the American government. With we have many American troops still stationed here in Korea. We
Sure.
work closely. We work closely with the American military and the government. So
Mhm.
I'm sure the government knows something. But I think that's the reason why they're more seclusive about this subject, especially so.
I would think so.
Hmm.
It's just fascinating. How large is the Korean UAP Society these days? Do you have active researchers or?
So our group has just there has been a UFO research group
Mhm.
back dating back 20 to 30 years, but then it kind of died out,
Mhm.
and we kind of started up a new organization just last year,
Mhm.
and we have 15 members or so. A lot of them are we have uh, I would say 8 and 9 PhDs in engineering as well as biology. And personally, myself, I'm not a PhD, but I try to invite people like that
Yes,
and try
indeed.
to grow our society so that perhaps be, have more awareness on UAP topic to the Korean
I think
public.
it's worth pointing out. I mean, your group, you've had to struggle against a very strong, it seems to me, official heavy-handed suppression of UFO or UAP data for generations, and then as a result, a culture very likely that is just not open to this as a result
Exactly.
of that. So you've had an entire lifetime of essentially this heavy blanket over the discussion,
Mhm.
open discussion of this subject. So your group, it seems to me, you're doing very important work here in against very difficult odds. It seems to me in researching the subject and bringing it to light for the rest of the world. So I think you are all to be commended for
Thank you
that.
very much. Major obstacle I'm having right now is to invite young generation people into our group. A lot of the majority of members are have been in ufology for many years,
Mhm.
but what we need is more young people into this group that would foster this awareness here in Korea.
Yeah. So you've got your website is, which again I will encourage people to link to. And look, if it's in Korean, I'm sure people can translate it without a big problem these days. So
Sure thing.
I hope people can have at it. Um, in terms of getting publicity within your country for this, is that just too far ahead to even think about? Is that too difficult to do, or are you trying to spread the word in some way?
I'm actually holding a conference this coming 26th of August,
Mhm.
and we'll be live broadcasting our event to the Korean audience.
Absolutely
And what I'm
wonderful.
trying to cover is I'm gonna deeply cover the recent public congressional hearing and what's been happening over at the states.
Yes.
What's been reflected into the NDAA and what's been happening with the David Grush whistleblower and whatnot.
Yeah.
Almost none of the Korean people knows about this event. So I'm going to cover deeply into this subject.
Excellent.
Try to get some attraction here.
Yeah.
Traction here.
I wish you success in that. And if there's any small thing that I can do to help, I'm very glad that we've established this connection. I very much enjoyed my being interviewed by your group a couple of months ago, and it wasn't just by you, but colleagues of yours as well, all of
Right.
whom were just really excellent, very knowledgeable, very impressive. Even if it's a small group, it's a very impressive group you've gone over there. So I wish you all the success and continued success in digging up some cases as well. I have
Thank
a
you,
feeling.
Richard. You've been my inspiration as well.
Oh well,
I'll be
thank
following
you,
your work. So,
thank you very much.
and I'll be happy to keep you posted with any events that are happening in Korea.
Anything you
Any
do, I will do
events.
everything I can to spread the word here. I think
Right.
people need to know that the world does not stop at the borders of the United States or Europe. There's a big world out there. There are sightings that go on all the time, and uh, I feel that we still do not have even uh, a, an idea about how active on a daily basis, I would say, this phenomenon is around the world.
Right.
We're doing our best to collect the accounts, but clearly, even where you are, you've got a database. You're getting 50 to 60 cases sightings a year.
Right.
I have no doubt that there's much more than that, right?
There must be, and this definitely shows why this is a global phenomenon, right?
Mhm.
South Korea is at the opposite side of the globe from the United States. We both shared a similar type of UFO history, right, over the years, over
That's
the
exactly right.
decades, course of decades.
Mhm.
So this clearly shows that this is a global phenomenon. This should be remembered.
Most definitely, it might be the most significant part of the phenomenon. The fact that it is global, it blankets the earth, it's comprehensive, and it's going on every day, every week.
Mhm.
Um, oh yeah, last question
Right.
relating to the current database that you have. Is it realistic for me to ask how easy is it for your team to do follow-up investigation of these? I mean, you're a MUFON member, so I'm going to guess that there are some cases, perhaps, where a MUFON investigator such as yourself might do some interviews or some follow-up. Is this the norm with the cases that are coming in? Is it easy or is it not easy to do that?
Well, typically the cases that are submitted through the MUFON database, a lot of the evidence that are submitted are very limited. It's just the series of photos, and that's very difficult for us to make any findings. What we really need is a video, and these videos are often reported through the Korean database because of course there's a language barrier, and a lot of the
Yeah.
Korean people reports to this Korean database through videos, and those that report their sightings are very friendly. We conduct interviews,
Mhm.
and we go to the sites as well,
Yeah.
and but then yeah, they're quite friendly when it comes to uh, us
So
digging through the evidence and whatnot.
so some of I guess you're saying some of these cases do get some kind of follow-up investigation, but it
It
sounds like
does,
it's
it
a
does, it
small
does.
I'm guessing a small number.
So we Korean UAP researchers, we gather, we meet every 2 months or so, and we talk about these cases, and we discuss whether one of these cases are worth finding more about,
Mhm. Great.
right? And
Yeah.
it's not just the UFO cases. We also have these reportings. Rarely, not very often. We rarely get these reportings coming up from people who supposedly got abducted.
Oh, really?
So that's something that we also look into as well.
Well, that's
Not
interesting.
many though, very
Um,
rare.
yeah.
Right.
Have I feel like I'm asking a lot of questions that may not be fair because I don't want to surprise you with a question here, ambush you,
So,
but have you found any abduction cases that are worthwhile following up, that when you or your team look at, you think, oh my goodness, could this possibly be true? Have you gotten any of those?
we've looked into 2 to 3 abduction cases so far, and all of them to this date didn't seem that credible.
Yeah.
Due to
It
the
happens.
as
Yeah.
per the reporting of the person that we received, didn't seem credible enough for us to kind of follow up with it.
Follow up.
Mhm.
Well, that is interesting. Makes me wonder about all of this, though.
Mhm.
Well, this has just been an extremely fast-moving interview. I mean, it went by so fast. I can't believe we've been talking for more than 1 hour, and I'm actually shocked. It feels like I've been talking with you for 15 minutes. So really fascinating.
I'll be happy to share more events if at a later date. I mean, I've covered some of the big UFO history in Korea, but
Mhm.
what I'm going to be doing for the next few months are try to delve into
Mhm.
the more recent Korean UFO events. That's something I'm currently working on right now.
Yeah, why
So,
not? I mean, it's absolutely worthwhile.
mhm,
For myself as well, like there's a tendency to look back at the past cases as like the original great cases, but fact is they go on all the time. They're happening today. They're happening this
mhm,
week. So
mhm,
it's always worthwhile.
mhm,
These are just great cases. And I guess the last observation that I have with the several that you have shared is to just point out, I think viewers can already figure this out, but the cases you have are very much in line with cases that we have known about from other parts of the world
interesting.
for many years.
Mhm,
There. This is the thing about the UFO subject. Every case is extraordinary
mhm,
and is also commonplace. It's
mhm,
both. These are extraordinary events, and when a lot of times we look at them, we think, "Oh, well, there can't be anything else like it. It's just so unusual." And then you find, no, there are other cases
mhm,
that are comparable to what we have here. And in fact, I would say that strengthens the case
mhm, mhm.
to show that they are part of a wider pattern. Um, and it's just a matter of, for me, my biggest interest these days, one of them, I guess, is just trying to understand the motivations for what is going on the other side of it. What are these operators of these craft? What's their mission? What are they trying to do
Likewise,
when they do these
I
things?
agree with you.
It's very difficult for me to, you can think in the big picture they're here for this purpose or that purpose, but when you get into specific sightings,
Mhm.
uh, you have to wonder, like, what are their orders
Right,
in these cases
motivations, intentions, right? Some
specifically? Yeah,
I'm on the same page with you. I'm not that much interested in the sighting itself, but rather than the reasons why these are happening in that
yeah,
specific region at
exactly.
that specific date, right?
Yeah,
The motivation, intention, the reason.
precisely.
That's something that I'm interested as well.
They are happening. They are
Mhm.
happening, and we need to be on top of that. So for that, I really want to thank you, Jinwoo Yu, and your colleagues in the Korean UAP Society. Um, I think you have a dedicated and really capable group of people there, and I just wish you all the best of success. And I know that we'll stay in touch. And I definitely look forward to the next time we talk, and we can share more information at that time.
Thank you very much, Richard.
It was my pleasure. Again, for listeners, viewers, I have links to everything below, and that will be for the UAPKorea.com, to X-Line, which is the YouTube channel for the UAP Korea group. And also, Jinwoo just kindly gave me the database for kufos.net. That's kufos with a K, and that's the Korean.
KUFOS.net. That's the
Yes,
database
exactly.
where you submit your setting reporting.
We will have
Or you
those.
can just report them to uapkorea.com, whichever source you prefer. You can
Perfect.
do that in English as well. So anything.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Well, I'm loath to close the conversation, but I think we've covered a lot of ground here. So why don't we'll end it here.
Mhm.
And again, I would like to thank you, Jinwoo Yu, and the Korean UAP Society for being here with me on this program. I want to thank the listeners for staying with us to the end. It was absolutely, I think, worthwhile.
Mhm.
And with that, I guess I'll just say if anyone else is interested in what I do, hey, you can like this video, share the video, please. Do that if you think you've got a place you want to share it to. And subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost you anything. And if you really like what I do, go check out richarddolanmembers.com, where I do my stuff all the time, every week. So with that, I'll thank everyone for being here with us. I'll catch you all again very, very soon. And in the meantime, let us continue fighting the good fight. Later.